Okay, so get ready because we are diving deep into Mary Shelley's Frankenstein today. But not the monster movie version you might know. We're going way deeper into the original text and its themes, pulling in some early reviews and even a little background from Wikipedia.
Yeah, it's really amazing how this novel, written, during a time of huge scientific discovery and societal change, still speaks to us now. The themes of ethics, ambition, the implications of pushing boundaries, they still resonate today.
Totally. It seems like everyone knows Frankenstein, but when you really dig into the original text, especially with that historical context, you realize how much the creature is misunderstood.
It's true, and that's what we're doing today. Setting the record straight, going beyond those movie tropes to understand why the creature became this global symbol of unchecked ambition and fear of the unknown.
Let's start with that, actually.
Yeah.
The biggest misconception, the creature. He is not Frankenstein.
Right. Right from the start, Shelley makes us think about identity. The creature doesn't even get a name, and that reflects his lack of belonging in the world. Victor Frankenstein, the scientist who creates him, well, his name is tied to the creature forever.
And that's got to be intentional, right? Victor's so focused on his pursuit, driven to understand the secrets of life. I mean, he says, "So much has been done," exclaimed the soul of Frankenstein. "More, far more will I achieve. Treading in the steps already marked, I will pioneer a new way, explore unknown powers, and unfold to the world the deepest mysteries of creation." That drive blinds him to everything else.
It does. Victor's ambition totally overshadows the responsibility that comes with creating life. He's horrified by how the creature looks and abandons him, leaving this sentient being alone to deal with a world that rejects him.
Imagine that, being thrown into the world, no idea what's going on, totally alone, trying to just exist. What really got me was the creature's ability to learn. He wants connection so badly that he observes this family of cottagers, and from their interactions, he starts to understand language, compassion, even morality.
Amazing, right? He educates himself in the most unexpected ways. He finds a copy of Plutarch's Lives and is totally captivated by these tales of great leaders, taking in all these lessons about virtue and justice. It's crazy, his whole idea of good and evil comes from these ancient heroes.
A being created in a lab, learning about morality from a book, makes you wonder if those values are taught or if there's something we're born with.
Doesn't it? And here's where it gets really interesting. Even with this desire for connection, this developing morality, the creature is constantly met with fear and rejection just because of his appearance.
Talk about prejudice. Shelley isn't just telling a scary story. She's showing us how easy it is for fear to just wipe out compassion.
And we see that play out in how people treat the creature. He helps that family he's watching, gathering wood, clearing paths, and their reaction when they see him is care.
It's like, don't judge a book by its cover, but way more intense.
Exactly. And that constant rejection, the reminder that he's other, it makes him so angry. It's this cycle of fear and isolation that leads him to want revenge against his creator.
Makes you think, if someone had just been kind to him, would things be different? Shows how important empathy and understanding are, even for a creature born from, ambition and science.
That's the core of the story, right? The creature becomes a reflection of Victor's own flaws, this living, breathing consequence of what happens with unchecked ambition, abandoning your creations, literally and metaphorically.
You see that in how Victor handles everything, too. He doesn't take responsibility. He's just paralyzed by guilt and paranoia. He puts off his marriage to Elizabeth because he's scared of the creature's revenge. He's so messed up by his mistakes, he can't even be happy.
Living in a prison of his own making. And we should talk about the women in Victor's life. These powerful female figures in the story. Elizabeth, all compassion and kindness. And then Justine, the servant who's unjustly accused and executed for a crime she didn't commit.
Their stories say so much about the society Shelley was writing about. They become victims in this tragedy, embodying the empathy and human connection that the creature wants but can never really have.
And Justine's trial. It shows how flawed justice systems can be, how fear and assumptions win out over reason, and then there are irreversible consequences.
Even in this world that thinks it's all about order and logic, Shelley shows us how easily things fall apart when fear takes over.
And Shelley knew about loss firsthand. Her mother, her half-sister, even her own child. That grief and injustice in the story, it wasn't just an idea for her, she lived it.
Knowing that makes the story hit even harder. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about how much the creature wants acceptance, the tragedy of being alone, but he's also eloquent, he's thoughtful, He can even be self-sacrificing. He's not just some monster.
Right, one of the most compelling things about the novel is how well-spoken he is, his use of language, how he expresses these complex emotions. That final speech is proof of his humanity.
And he taught himself all that just by watching, reading books. Makes his isolation that much more tragic. He wants so badly to prove he's more than a monster, but it backfires every time and just causes more pain.
He's stuck, right? He wants companionship, acceptance, but only gets horror and rejection. This internal conflict, the way he deals with being capable of both good and evil, is what makes him such a fascinating character.
Is it nature or nurture then? Is he just a product of his environment? Or is there something dark inside him from the start? Was he always going to be the monster everyone sees?
That is the question, isn't it? And people are still debating it. Shelley doesn't make it easy. She gives us this complex being, forces us to face our own biases and figure out what good and evil really are, what it actually means to be human.
This story's over 200 years old, but it feels relevant today, doesn't it? Think about AI, genetic engineering. It's like science fiction is becoming reality.
And those same questions Shelley asked are still relevant. Frankenstein reminds us that progress without responsibility, creation without compassion, it's a recipe for disaster.
And just like the creature being judged for how he looks, those themes of social justice and fear of the other are still so relevant. This isn't a story about a monster. It's about how we treat each other, how quickly we judge, and the impact of those judgments.
Exactly. We've looked at the creature's journey, his desire for connection, how tragic it is that he's isolated, and the bigger issues it all raises. But what about Victor? What's Shelley saying about his role in this?
Victor might be smart and a scientific genius, but he's deeply flawed, blinded by ambition, reckless in how he pursues knowledge, and let's be real, kind of a coward to abandon his creation like he did.
Yeah, he has his moments of regret, for sure. Times in the story where he's clearly wrestling with what he did, acknowledging the suffering, but is feeling sorry enough to make up for it. Shelley lets the reader decide that.
And that ambiguity, not having easy answers, makes Frankenstein so good. It's not just good versus evil. You see the nuance, the struggles, the compassion, and the cruelty in both the creature and his creator, and that makes their downfall even more tragic.
And that's why it's such a powerful book. It's reflecting our own humanity back at us, our potential for creation and destruction, that constant struggle between the two.
Frankenstein has also really impacted our culture, hasn't it? I mean, movies, comic books, Halloween costumes. That image of Frankenstein's monster is everywhere. But how often do those really capture how complex Shelley's work is?
It's amazing how the novel has inspired so many adaptations and interpretations. But the creature is often so simplified, stripped of his complexities, and just becomes this one-dimensional, scary figure.
Right. Everyone forgets that he could be gentle, he wanted connection. That classic image, the big brute with bolts in his neck, it's not even close to what Shelley wrote.
It shows how important it is to go back to the original text. Read the novel, confront your own ideas about what's monstrous. Don't just look at the surface. Think about the complexities of this being who, even though he's called a monster, has this deep humanity we miss.
It's both terrifying and moving. You feel for the creature, even when he does terrible things. You get his anger, even if you don't agree with what he does.
That's good storytelling, right? Challenging how we see things, making us deal with uncomfortable truths, staying in our minds long after we're done reading.
Okay, so where does Victor go from here? He's got this huge guilt, fear, the threat of revenge hanging over him. Does he find a way to stop the creature?
Oh, this is where it gets even darker. Victor becomes consumed with protecting everyone and getting revenge. He goes on this dangerous journey to find the creature.
It's cat and mouse, but with way higher stakes.
Exactly. And as this chase goes on, Victor is pushed to his limits, both mentally and physically. He's literally following the creature through these desolate, frozen wastelands.
He's a long way from that ambitious, reckless scientist we met at the beginning. Now he's just obsessed with hunting down his creation, who's the monster now, right?
It's really impressive how Shelley writes these darker, almost primal parts of human nature, what comes out when we're pushed to our limits.
Oh, does he do it? Does Victor actually catch the creature and end this?
He does, and it happens just as dramatically as you'd imagine. These two, creator and creation, finally meet face to face on this huge sheet of ice. Nothing but snow and silence.
Sounds like something out of a poem. Just this battle of wills in this empty, unforgiving landscape.
It is. And the things they say to each other. Powerful. The creature sees how weak Victor is and taunts him, reminds him of all the pain he caused. "You have destroyed my hopes. You have extinguished my love for humankind," he says.
You can almost hear how bitter and hopeless he is. He's lost everything. Family, acceptance, faith in humanity. It's hard not to feel bad for him, even after all he's done.
But even then, there's still that tiny bit of hope for connection. He reminds Victor of his promise to create a companion for him. If I have no ties and no affections, hatred and vice must be my portion, he says.
That little glimmer in the darkness. He still wants something more, something better.
What about Victor? He's in pain, wants revenge so badly. He refuses at first.
Can you blame him after everything that's happened? It would be so easy to write him off as just wanting revenge now.
But Victor does something surprising. He starts to think that maybe, just maybe, making the creature a companion might stop the violence. It's a big moment because, for the first time, he might take responsibility instead of just trying to destroy what he made.
So he finally agrees to give the creature what he wants. After all this time.
He does. But he's scared. He knows this could be a huge mistake, that whatever he creates could be even more terrifying.
I'm hooked. Does he do it? Does he create this companion?
Well, that's the story for part 2 of our deep dive.
All right, so we left off with Victor agreeing to create a companion for the creature. Like a tiny spark of hope in this whole mess of revenge and sadness. What happens next?
Well, let me tell you, it doesn't get easier from here. Victor starts working on his promise, but he can't shake this anxiety. Imagine the nightmares, the visions of this new being he's creating, and the potential for things to go very, very wrong.
Man, talk about a tough choice. On the one hand, he promised this being who just wants a friend, right? But on the other hand, what if he creates something even more destructive than the first one?
Exactly, Victor's biggest fear. And as he works on this new creation, the doubts just grow stronger. He starts picturing the worst case scenarios. A female creature, even more monstrous, them having kids, a whole race of beings that threaten humanity.
Okay, now he's playing God, and not in a good way.
Exactly. It gets to be too much for Victor, all these possibilities, and he makes a decision that changes everything. He can't go through with it.
He stops after coming so close.
He does. It's this desperate moment, fear, this weight of responsibility. Victor destroys his work, smashes the female creature before she can even live.
Wow. I bet that didn't go over well with, the first creature.
Oh, the creature is furious, beyond betrayed. He feels abandoned and rejected all over again. And his revenge, it gets personal. He swears to make Victor suffer by taking away the one good thing he has left in his life.
This is where it gets really real, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The creature takes off, but not before promising to come back and ruin Victor's wedding night. I shall be with you on your wedding night, he says. Chilling stuff, even now.
Okay, that's pretty ominous, yeah. Victor's got this ticking time bomb to deal with. What does he even do?
He's terrified, obviously, full of guilt, feeling doomed. But he doesn't just give in to fear, he decides to tell someone everything, his deepest, darkest secret. He's hoping to protect the people he cares about.
He confesses. After all this time, who does he tell?
His father. Victor goes home and tells him the whole horrifying story, his creation, what happened because of it, everything.
I can't even imagine what his dad must have thought. It's not like he's going to say, oh yeah, my son created a murderous monster Tuesday, am I right?
It's actually a really powerful moment between them, and it shows how good Shelley was at writing relationships because Victor's father doesn't turn away. Of course, he doesn't believe it at first, but then he does, and instead of yelling or judging, he offers comfort and tries to understand.
Wow, that's huge. Most people would run for the hills after a confession like that.
Right. Victor's dad is like this beacon of humanity in all the darkness. He wants Victor to find some peace. He tells him to focus on his upcoming wedding to Elizabeth and try to be happy.
So there's a chance, even after all that life can go on.
It's a small chance, but it's there. And even with the creature's threat hanging over them, Victor and Elizabeth decide to get married. They both just want some normalcy, some joy.
It's a brave decision for sure, choosing love when everything seems determined to tear it apart.
Absolutely. And for a little while during the wedding, Victor lets himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he's outrun his past.
Oh no, this is where it all goes wrong, isn't it?
It is. The wedding night comes. Victor is so tense, waiting for the creature to attack, and then the worst possible thing happens.
Don't tell me.
The creature keeps his word, but he doesn't hurt Victor. He kills Elizabeth.
My God, that's brutal. After everything, after thinking maybe they could have a fresh start.
It's awful, right? And it shows just how bad the consequences of Victor's actions are. Elizabeth, she was innocent, loving. Now she's another victim in this whole creation destruction mess.
What about Victor? How does he deal with losing another person he loves?
He's destroyed, overcome with grief and rage. His creations, his friends, his dad, and now Elizabeth, they're all gone.
Does he give up then? Or does this make him want revenge even more?
Revenge is all he has left. He doesn't care about redemption or making the world better. It's just pure vengeance now.
And we're left with this feeling of dread, this chase, this need to destroy. It's far from over.
It's not. In the last part of our deep dive, we're going to follow Victor as he chases the preacher to the ends of the earth. We'll see how deep his despair goes and what happens in his pursuit of revenge.
Welcome back. So, the last we saw Victor, he was completely devastated by Elizabeth's death, like overcome with grief and rage.
Yeah, and that rage takes over everything. He's not interested in a normal life anymore, not even redemption. He just wants to hunt down the creature and make him pay.
He's convinced that destroying the creature is the only way he can find peace, right? But it feels like it's more than that. It's like he wants to destroy anything that reminds him he messed up so badly.
It's like this descent into darkness, fueled by grief, guilt, and this complete loss of self. Shelley writes about how he has this insatiable craving to make the creature suffer the way he has.
And she really describes what that does to Victor physically. He's pushing himself so hard, chasing this phantom across the world, just a vague trail and this burning obsession driving him on.
There's a part where Victor describes himself as a shattered wreck who's only living for revenge. My heart was turned to bile and my brain burned with the thought of vengeance, he writes in his journal. Intense stuff.
It's like he's turning into the creature, in a way. Driven by this single purpose, nothing else matters. But the creature wanted connection. And Victor. It's like he finds some kind of comfort in being alone.
He pushes everyone away, anyone who tries to help, like that magistrate who gives him shelter and tells him to find forgiveness. But Victor's not listening. He's too deep in his pain.
So he's completely alone, exhausted, but still chasing this goal. Does he ever actually find the creature? Or does he just completely lose himself in the chase?
He finds him. They both end up in the Arctic, this empty, unforgiving place that becomes a powerful symbol for what's going on inside them. It's this desperate chase at the edge of the world, creator versus creation.
Like that final showdown is inevitable, the result of all their choices, all the pain, all the chasing.
And what's interesting is when they finally meet, the creature, he's not the angry, vengeful being you would expect. He's tired, weak, almost resigned. He even says he regrets the things he's done.
He does. After everything, there's still a part of him that regrets it.
There's a moment when he tells Victor, I was benevolent and good. Misery made me a fiend. Make me happy and I shall again be virtuous. He's saying Victor had a part in how he turned out.
Makes you wonder, if Victor had shown him kindness earlier, would things be different? But is it too late for forgiveness now? Can Victor even do that?
At first, he's not moved at all. He wants revenge so much he can't see anything else. But as they talk out there in the Arctic, something changes.
He starts to see the creature as something more than just a monster he has to destroy.
Maybe not that. I think what Victor realizes is how much he's wasted his own life. He's exhausted, completely broken, and this pursuit, this revenge, it's pointless. He's going to lose himself.
So it's flipped now, isn't it? Victor's the one who's lost, while the creature has found some kind of peace.
And right when he realizes this, Victor collapses. The chase, the cold. It's too much. He's dying.
The creature wouldn't just stand there and watch him die after all this, would he?
He doesn't. He actually shows Victor compassion, helps him get on a passing ship. And it turns out it's the same ship captained by Robert Walton, the guy whose letters we've been hearing this whole time.
Wait, that's Walton from the beginning of the story. The explorer who wanted to hear Victor's story so badly.
That's the one. And we see everything that happens next through his eyes. Victor, on his deathbed, tells Walton his whole life story, warns him about ambition without limits, and why he has to own up to his actions.
It's like a confession, but it's also a warning, trying to find some meaning in all this destruction.
Exactly. He's begging Walton to learn from his mistakes, to choose compassion, to find fulfillment in people instead of chasing glory. Don't be like me, he's saying.
So even at the end, Victor's trying to help someone, keep them from being consumed by darkness. But what about the creature? What happens to him?
He shows up one more time, goes into Walton's cabin, and stands over Victor's body. But he doesn't brag or celebrate. He cries.
He cries for Victor, the man who made his life a living hell.
He does. He says he's sorry for what he's done. I, the miserable and the abandoned, am an abortion to be spurned at and kicked and trampled on, he says. But he understands what Victor went through, too. He suffered, too. Oh, how he suffered. It's like he finally sees how connected they were, how much pain they shared.
It's so sad because they finally understand each other, but it's too late to change anything.
And that's when the creature makes a choice. He decides to kill himself. I shall die. And what will be my epitaph? That I was a monster, he asks, but he's going to be in control. My heart yearns to be quiet, he says.
He chooses to end his own pain and maybe, in a way, give Victor the peace he always wanted.
The story ends with the creature walking off into the Arctic, leaving Walton and his crew to think about everything they've heard.
So the creator and the creation are both gone. And we're left with this story about destruction, loss, and how our choices shape us. What a powerful story.
Frankenstein is more than a horror story. It's about what it means to be human, the power of grief and isolation, and how much we need each other. It's about making the right choices even when things are hard.
It really makes you think about good and evil, what we do when we lose someone, and how revenge can consume us. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Frankenstein. We'll see you next time.